Hello everyone, and welcome to our channel. If you love true emotional stories that touch the heart and teach powerful life lessons, you're in the right place. Today's story is one that will stay with you for a long time. It's about a mother who lost her home in a tragic fire, and when she turned to her only son for help, what he did next broke her heart completely. But this isn't just a story about loss. It's about forgiveness, hope, and finding light even after everything burns down. Before we begin, if you're watching for the first time, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another emotional story like this one. And tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? We love seeing how far our stories travel around the world. Now sit back, relax, and watch till the very end, because this story will touch your soul and remind you that even after heartbreak, love always finds a way back. Music swells, fade into story visuals or narration. Part 1. The Fire. Soft music fades in, crackling sounds of fire, sirens in the distance. I used to think home was a feeling, a heartbeat in the walls, the smell of coffee in the morning, the warmth that greets you when you walk through the door. But I learned in one long, terrifying night that a home can disappear in minutes. It happened on a Sunday evening. I'd just finished washing the dishes, humming to myself, thinking about calling my son, Mark. It had been a few weeks since we'd spoken. He was busy with work, his wife, their new baby. I didn't want to bother him. I remember I lit a candle, the lavender one he'd given me last Mother's Day, and set it by the window. The power had flickered earlier because of the storm, and the whole house smelled faintly of rain and old wood. When the smoke alarm went off, I thought it was just another one of those false alarms. The house was old, the wiring was touchy. But then I saw the orange glow. It started in the living room. A spark, maybe from the old socket near the TV. Within seconds, the curtains caught. I grabbed a towel, tried to smother the flames, but the heat pushed back like a living thing. The smoke was thick. I couldn't breathe. I remember coughing, calling for help, my voice hoarse and useless. I stumbled toward the door, clutching my purse, my phone, my keys, but I dropped them somewhere along the way. By the time I made it outside, the whole front of the house was burning. My knees gave out on the wet grass. I just sat there, shaking, barefoot, watching 30 years of my life burn to the ground. The fire trucks came fast. Neighbors had called. I heard someone shouting, "Is anyone inside?" "No," I screamed. "No, it's just me." When the flames finally died, it was nearly morning. The air smelled like metal and ash. A firefighter walked up to me, his face hidden behind soot and exhaustion. "Ma'am, we're sorry. There's nothing left to save. Nothing left. My home. Gone. The photo albums, my husband's old records, the quilt my mother made me when I was 15. Every birthday card, every memory turned to smoke. They told me it might have been faulty wiring. I nodded, though I could barely hear them. My body was there, but my mind, it was somewhere inside those ashes, still walking through my living room, still believing I could put the fire out. I didn't cry right away, not until they handed me a blanket and said I couldn't stay there. Then it hit me. I had nowhere to go. I sat in the back of a police car for warmth, my fingers trembling around a styrofoam cup of coffee. I thought of Mark, my son, my only child. He had a good life, a beautiful house in the suburbs, a wife, a little boy who'd just turned 1. He'd offered before, "Mom, if you ever need help, if you ever get tired of that old place, come stay with us." At the time, I'd smiled and said, "I'm fine, sweetheart. I have everything I need right here," and I meant it. Until that night. I pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked, but it worked. My fingers hesitated over his number. I didn't want to sound desperate, but what else could I do? The shelter they offered was full, and the motel down the road wanted more money than I had. I pressed call. "Hey, Mom," he answered, groggy but kind. "Everything okay?" The words stuck in my throat. "Mark, my house. There was a fire. What? Are you serious? Are you okay? I'm okay. But the house, it's gone. Everything's gone. There was silence on the other end. Then he said, "Oh my God, Mom. What do you need? Do you want me to come get you?" For a moment, relief flooded me. My son, my baby. He was coming. Sound of car pulling up. Soft piano music. He arrived 2 hours later, his headlights cutting through the fog. When he saw me, standing there in borrowed clothes from a neighbor, his face fell. "Oh, Mom." He hugged me tightly, but I could feel the hesitation, the way his arms held, then slowly loosened. "It's okay," I whispered, even though it wasn't. "I'm just glad you came." He helped me into the car. I looked back one last time at the ruins of my home. The fire trucks were gone now, just blackened wood, twisted metal, and silence. As we drove, I tried not to cry. I stared at the passing lights, telling myself this was just a bad dream, that I'd wake up in my bed and everything would be okay. "Sarah's at home with the baby," Mark said after a while. "She's been really tired lately. We haven't had much sleep, but we'll figure something out." "Of course," I said softly. "I'll try not to be a bother." He glanced at me, frowning. "Mom, you're not a bother." But I could hear something behind his voice, the hesitation, the uncertainty. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Narration slows, softer tone. When we reached his house, the sky was just starting to brighten, a dull pink over the rooftops. His home was beautiful. 2 stories, clean white paint, a little swing set in the yard. It looked like a dream. Inside, everything smelled like coffee and baby powder. I stood awkwardly in the entryway while he called out, "Sarah? Mom's here." A few seconds later, she appeared, his wife, Sarah. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, what happened?" Mark explained quickly. The fire, the loss, how I had nowhere to go. Sarah listened, her face pale, her lips tight. "Of course," she said finally. "You can stay here." "For a while? For a while?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mark set up the guest room for me. Clean sheets, a nightstand, even a little lamp that looked brand new. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work that morning, saying, "We'll figure things out soon, okay, Mom? Try to rest." When the door closed, I sat on the bed, staring at my hands. They smelled faintly of smoke, even after 3 washes. I should have felt grateful. I had a roof over my head again. But for some reason, my chest felt heavy. The walls felt too white, too quiet. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong there. Fade out on soft instrumental, sound of rain outside. Soft piano and distant rain sound in the background. The first few days at Mark's house were quiet, too quiet. I kept to myself, trying not to make any noise, trying not to take up space. I'd wake up early, before the sun, and make coffee. Old habits. But here, everything felt different. The coffee machine was sleek and new, with buttons I didn't understand. Sarah liked her mornings calm, she said. No clutter, no smell of bacon, no noise. So I made my cup quietly, sat by the window, and watched the baby monitor blink on the counter. It's strange how small you can feel in a house so big. On the 3rd morning, Sarah walked in wearing her robe. Her eyes were tired, her tone polite. "Morning, Linda." "Morning, sweetheart," I said with a small smile. "I made coffee." She nodded, poured her own cup, and stood there for a moment, like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Finally, she sighed. "Mark mentioned your insurance company called. Did they say anything?" I shook my head. "They're still assessing. Said it could take weeks." "Oh." Her voice was soft, but I could hear the pause that followed. That heavy silence where kindness meets inconvenience. She smiled again, the kind people give when they're trying to hide discomfort. "Well, I'm sure things will work out soon." Music fades, slower narration. When Mark came home from work that evening, he was exhausted. His tie half undone, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes heavy. I wanted to cook him dinner, just like I used to. So I did. I found some chicken, made his favorite casserole, the one I'd made every Sunday when he was a kid. The house filled with that familiar smell, onions, herbs, warmth. When he walked in, he smiled. "Wow, Mom, that smells amazing." My heart swelled. For a moment, it felt like old times. Then Sarah appeared. I already ordered takeout," she said quietly. "You didn't have to cook." Mark looked between us. "Oh, well, I guess we can have both?" She forced a laugh. "Sure." But at dinner, she barely touched her plate. Mark ate in silence, glancing nervously between us. The baby started crying halfway through, and she got up, whispering something under her breath I couldn't quite catch. That night, I sat in my room staring at the casserole dish, still half full. I'd wrapped it carefully, hoping someone would eat it later. But the next morning, it was gone, tossed in the trash. The aluminum foil was still there, perfectly folded beside it. Sound of clock ticking, soft, melancholy guitar. Days turned into weeks. I tried to help, folding laundry, cleaning, watering plants. But every time, Sarah would politely stop me. "Oh, it's okay, Linda. I already did that." Or worse, "Please don't move things around." I have a system. She was never cruel. Not exactly. Just distant, controlled. And that, somehow, hurt more than anger ever could. One night, I heard them talking. I didn't mean to. The walls were thin, and I couldn't sleep. "Mark," Sarah whispered, "how long is your mom staying?" He sighed. "Until the insurance comes through, I guess. Maybe a few more weeks. It's been hard, you know. The baby wakes up if she moves around, and she's always doing things in the kitchen." "Sarah, she lost everything." "I know," she said softly, "and I feel awful. But this isn't working. You promised we'd have space. You promised we'd build our own routine." I pressed my hand to my chest, trying not to cry. I knew they were right. I was a disruption, a ghost drifting through their perfect little life. In the dark, I whispered to myself, "You're only here for a little while, Linda. Don't make trouble." Sound of wind outside, faint baby laughter fading in and out. The baby, little Noah, was the only one who seemed happy to see me. He'd giggle when I played peekaboo or grab my finger with those tiny hands. Sometimes, when Sarah wasn't looking, I'd hum him the lullaby I used to sing to Mark. He'd close his eyes instantly, like he knew it too. But one afternoon, while I was rocking him in my arms, Sarah walked in suddenly. "What are you doing?" she asked, sharper than usual. "I was just singing to him," I said softly. "He was fussy. I appreciate it, but I don't want him getting used to being held all the time. I'm trying to keep him on a schedule." She took him gently but firmly from my arms. The baby started crying again. "It's okay, Noah," she cooed, turning away from me. "Mommy's got you." Her words stung more than they should have. That night, I cried for the first time since the fire. Not because of the flames or the loss, but because I realized that even surrounded by family, I was utterly alone. Sound, faint fire crackle echo, blending into soft piano. A week later, my insurance adjuster called. He said they'd approved partial compensation, not enough to rebuild, but enough for a small apartment. I was relieved, but something inside me ached. This wasn't what I'd imagined for my later years. Living in a box apartment, alone, starting over from nothing. When I told Mark the news, he smiled. "That's great, Mom. You can finally have your own place again." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "My own place." Sarah chimed in, her voice brighter than it had been in weeks. "That's wonderful, Linda. I can help you look for something nearby." I could hear it in her tone, the quiet relief, and I couldn't blame her. Still, When I went to bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about my old house, the laughter, the pictures, the smell of rain on the porch. All gone. I whispered to the darkness, I lost my home, but somehow I lost my family too. Music fades, slow heartbeat sound transitions into silence. Soft ambient piano, gentle morning sounds, a baby crying faintly in the distance. The day I started looking for apartments, it was raining again. Funny how storms kept following me, like they had something to say. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, scrolling through listings. Everything was so expensive. The kind of money I had from insurance could maybe cover a few months' rent. Not much else. Mark came down in his work clothes, his tie crooked, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, I'll be there in 10, he said, grabbing his coffee. When he hung up, he looked at me and smiled. "Morning, Mom. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said. "I was just looking for places to live." He hesitated for a second. "Already? I mean, are you sure you're ready?" I forced a small laugh. "I don't really have a choice, do I?" He sat across from me, glancing at the screen. "Wow, prices are insane." "I know," I said softly. "But I'll find something." He reached out, touching my hand briefly. "You don't have to rush, okay? Stay as long as you need." I nodded, though I could tell from the way he said it that he didn't mean forever. He meant a little longer. Just long enough not to feel guilty. Sound, door closing, car pulling away. Music softens. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk. Sarah was at the store, and the house was too quiet again. I walked through the neighborhood. Perfect lawns, mailboxes with shiny numbers, houses that all looked the same. When I reached the end of the street, I saw a house for rent. Small, but clean. I wrote down the number, thinking maybe, just maybe, it could work. But then I looked at the price again and laughed softly to myself. No way, not even close. I kept walking, trying to clear my head. And that's when I saw Mark's car, parked outside a cafe. I smiled, thinking maybe I could surprise him, say hello. But as I got closer, I noticed he wasn't alone. He was sitting with a woman, not Sarah, someone younger, maybe from work. They were leaning in close, talking quietly. He laughed, that deep, easy laugh he hadn't used around me in weeks. For a second, my stomach turned cold. I told myself not to assume anything. It could have been work, a friend. But when she reached across the table and touched his hand, and he didn't pull away, my heart sank. I backed away slowly, my breath caught somewhere in my throat. I didn't want to see more, didn't want to know. I walked home in the rain, soaked, shaking, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. But deep down, I knew what I saw. Sound of front door opening, rain dripping. When Mark got home that night, he seemed nervous, distracted. "How was your day, Mom?" he asked, not looking me in the eye. "Oh, just walked around," I said quietly. He nodded, loosening his tie. "Good, good." I wanted to ask. I wanted to say, "Who was she, Mark?" But I didn't. Because part of me still believed in the little boy who used to run into my arms after school. The boy who'd cry when he broke something, who'd swear he'd never lie to me. So instead, I smiled and said, "Dinner's ready." Music fades lower, tone more somber. A few nights later, Sarah invited her sister over for dinner. The house was full of laughter, clinking glasses, the baby babbling. I tried to join in, but every time I spoke, the conversation shifted, like I wasn't really there. When I offered to clear the table, Sarah's sister whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "She seems lonely." Sarah sighed. "Yeah, she's been through a lot, then quieter, but it's been difficult." I pretended not to notice, my hands trembling as I carried the dishes. That night, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, looking at the packed bag by the door. I'd started folding my clothes days ago, not because I was ready to leave, but because I wanted to feel prepared for something, anything. The next morning, Mark knocked softly. "Hey, Mom, can we talk?" My chest tightened. "Of course." He came in, sitting beside me. "I know things have been tense," he started. "Sarah's just been really stressed. The baby, work, everything. And I've been distracted." "Distracted," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked down. "Yeah, but listen. I found this apartment listing near downtown. It's small, but it's furnished. I could help you cover the first month or two." My throat burned. "You want me to move out?" He hesitated, then said softly, "I just think it might be good for everyone. Everyone." He said it like I was some kind of problem to solve, like my presence was something heavy that needed to be lifted off their lives. I nodded slowly. "Of course, honey. I understand." He looked relieved, and that hurt more than anything. Music swells, a quiet, emotional piano melody. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. The baby cried once. Sarah went to him quickly. I could hear her whispering softly, comforting him, her voice gentle and full of love. And I realized that's what I'd been chasing all along. Not a roof, not walls, just warmth. A place where I was wanted. But my home had burned down long before the fire. It had burned the moment my son stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as a burden. Soft piano fades in, low thunder rumbling in the distance. Moving day came faster than I expected. Mark helped me pack. Well, mostly, he stood there awkwardly while I folded what little I had left. A few shirts, a framed picture of him as a boy, a small box of keepsakes that somehow survived the fire. He loaded the boxes into his car in silence. Sarah stayed inside with the baby. She didn't come out to say goodbye. The drive to the new apartment was quiet, too. The sound of the wipers filled the space between us. I kept stealing glances at him, my son, my only child, the boy who once held my hand crossing the street, who used to whisper, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll always take care of you." Now he just looked tired, detached. When we pulled up, he parked in front of a small, gray building, the kind where every door looks the same and every hallway smells faintly of paint and old carpet. "This is it," he said, forcing a smile. "Not bad, right?" I looked up at the faded "For Rent" sign and swallowed hard. "It's fine, sweetheart. Thank you for helping me." He grabbed a box from the trunk. "I'll help you get settled." Sound, door creaking open, footsteps echoing on tile. The apartment was small, one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, no real living room. The windows faced a brick wall. Still, it was mine. Or at least, it would be. Mark set the boxes down and glanced around. "You've got everything you need?" "I think so," I said quietly. "I'll send you the payment for the first month later tonight," he said, already checking his phone. "After that, we'll figure something out, okay?" He looked up just long enough to smile, but his eyes, they weren't the same. There was a distance there, a wall I couldn't climb anymore. "Mark," I said softly, "can I ask you something?" He paused. "Sure." "Do you remember that night after your father's funeral? You promised you'd never leave me alone." He blinked, caught off guard. "Mom, that was a long time ago." "I know," I said, trying to smile, "but I still remember." He sighed, pocketing his phone. "Things change, Mom. People grow. Life gets complicated." His words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Soft instrumental, emotional piano, and faint rain. After he left, the silence in that apartment was unbearable. Every sound echoed, the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, the faint laughter of neighbors through the thin walls. I sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt before. That night, I tried to make it feel like home. I unpacked the photo frame, Mark, age 7, grinning with missing teeth, and set it on the windowsill. Then I placed the candle that had started it all, now nothing but a melted lump of lavender wax beside it. It was all I had left of my old life. When I finally lay down, I couldn't sleep. My body was tired, but my mind, it was replaying everything. The fire, the car ride, the look in Mark's eyes when he dropped me off. That coldness, that polite distance that said, I care, but not enough to stay. Morning sounds, birds faintly chirping. The next day, I tried to stay busy. I went to the store, bought a few things with the little money I had left. A blanket, some groceries, a second-hand kettle. When I came back, there was a letter slipped under my door, from the building manager. Rent due on the 5th. Late fees apply after 48 hours. I checked my phone, no message from Mark. I told myself maybe he was busy, maybe he'd forgotten. But as the hours turned into days, the message never came. Sound, phone dialing tone. By the third day, I called him. Hey, Mom, he answered quickly. I was just about to call you. Oh, good, I said softly. I got the rent notice. They said, yeah, about that, he interrupted. Listen, work's been crazy, and we had some unexpected expenses. I'll send it soon, okay? Just hang tight. Of course, I said. Don't worry about me. He exhaled with relief. Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand. When he hung up, I sat staring at the phone for a long time. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, from realization. He wasn't coming through this time. Music fades lower, soft tension builds. A week later, I got another knock at the door. The building manager again. Mrs. Hayes, your payment's overdue. I know, I said quietly. My son, he said he'd send it soon. He sighed. You've got until Friday, ma'am. When he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photo on the windowsill. I whispered, Mark, you promised. That night I called again. No answer. The next day, nothing. By the end of the week, I stopped trying. Soft, somber violin, slow fade. A few days later, there was another knock. But this time, it wasn't the landlord. It was Sarah. I froze when I opened the door. She looked perfect as always. Neat coat, calm smile, not a hair out of place. Sarah? What are you doing here? She stepped inside, glancing around the tiny apartment. I came to check on you. Mark's been worried. Worried, I repeated. He hasn't called. She hesitated, then sighed. He's under a lot of pressure right now. Work, the baby, everything. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Her words were polite, but her eyes were scanning the room. The smallness, the mess, the loneliness. I'm fine, I said softly. I'm used to being on my own. She smiled thinly. Good. That's good. When she left, she hugged me, light and brief, like touching something fragile. And as I watched her walk down the hall, I realized she wasn't checking on me. She was checking for him, making sure the problem, me, was safely tucked away, out of sight. Music slows, one soft piano note repeating faintly. That night, I didn't light any candles. I sat in the dark, listening to the city outside, sirens, cars, distant laughter. And I thought about all the times I'd told Mark he could always come to me. All the nights I stayed up when he was sick, all the birthdays, all the years of working 2 jobs to keep him fed, warm, and safe. Now I was the one knocking, and his eyes looked through me like I was no one. Cold, distant, a stranger. And that was the moment I realized something truly awful. Sometimes the hardest part of motherhood isn't letting go of your child. It's accepting that they've already let go of you. When I walked into their house that night, I felt like a stranger in a hotel lobby. Polite smiles, cold air, no warmth anywhere. My daughter-in-law, Emily, barely looked at me. Her eyes darted to the floor as if she couldn't wait for this moment to end. The guest room's upstairs, she said quietly. It's not much, but you can stay there for a bit." I smiled, because that's what mothers do, right? We smile, even when our hearts are cracking open. I followed her up the stairs, every step creaking like a reminder of how heavy my life had suddenly become. Pause. Sound of door closing softly. The guest room was fine. A plain bed, a lamp that flickered when I turned it on, and a window that looked out onto the street, where I could still see the faint smoke rising from what used to be my home, just a few miles away. My home. My little blue house with the white fence. Gone. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the tears come, silent and slow. I wanted to call my son, Ethan, to tell him how grateful I was, to remind him of how I used to tuck him in, whisper prayers over his sleepy little head. But now he was downstairs, laughing faintly at something on his phone, and I didn't belong in his world anymore. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and hope. Maybe today would be different, I thought. Maybe he'd come in, hug me, tell me everything was okay. I got dressed quickly and went downstairs. Emily was in the kitchen making breakfast. She didn't look up when I entered. Ethan sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, a mug in hand. I smiled. "Good morning," I said softly. "Morning," he replied, without looking up. Emily mumbled something about the eggs burning. I stood there for a moment, feeling like a shadow in my own family. Then Ethan finally looked up, noticing my silence. "Mom, you okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just still getting used to everything." He gave a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Pause. Low piano note. That day, I tried to make myself useful. I cleaned the dishes, folded laundry, even offered to help in the garden. Emily stopped me. "Oh, that's not necessary," she said quickly. Her voice was polite, but sharp, like a knife wrapped in tissue paper. She didn't want me touching anything. So I sat in the guest room most of the day, staring at the walls, listening to the quiet hum of a house that wasn't mine. Days turned into a week, and in that week I began to see the truth I didn't want to see. Ethan avoided me. He'd come home late, go straight to his room, and when we did talk, it was all small talk. Weather, work, traffic. Never about me, never about the fire, never about us. Emily, well, she started leaving subtle hints, like when she mentioned, "The house feels a bit crowded these days," while doing the dishes. Or when she sighed loudly after I used the washing machine. Little things, but they cut deeper than any words. One evening, after dinner, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. They didn't know I was standing in the hallway. Emily's voice was tight, whispering, "Ethan, we can't do this forever. Your mom, she needs to find another place. This isn't healthy." My heart stopped. Ethan's reply was low. "I know, Em. I just don't know how to tell her." That's when I backed away, slow, silent, before I could hear another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the carpet. I remembered when Ethan was 10 years old, how he used to sneak into my room when he had nightmares. He'd crawl into my bed, and I'd wrap my arms around him, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe. Mommy's here now." All these years later, I was the one having nightmares, and the same boy who once needed me couldn't wait to push me away. The next morning, I decided to try again. I made breakfast, pancakes, just like I used to make when he was little. When Ethan came down, I smiled and said, "Look what I made." Just like old times. He looked at the plate and hesitated. "Thanks, Mom, but we already ate," Emily added. "We're running late for work anyway." And just like that, they both walked out, leaving the pancakes untouched. I sat there, staring at the cold food. It wasn't about the pancakes. It was about everything they represented. Every memory, every piece of love I'd tried to hold on to. And now, it was all slipping away. That evening, when they came home, Emily barely said hello. She went straight upstairs. Ethan followed, but I stopped him. "Ethan," I said softly, "can we talk?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, I'm tired. Can it wait?" I nodded, but deep down, I knew time had already run out. Music softens, emotional, melancholic piano theme. In the silence of that guest room, I realized something painful. I wasn't really living there. I was just staying there, temporarily, inconveniently, a guest in my own son's life. And the longer I stayed, the more I could feel his kindness shrinking under the weight of embarrassment, discomfort, and guilt. He didn't want me there, not because he didn't love me, but because love wasn't enough anymore. I was a reminder of age, of obligation, of everything he wanted to escape, and that realization broke something deep inside me. That night, I folded my clothes neatly into a small bag. I sat on the bed, staring at the old photograph I'd managed to save from the fire. Me, Ethan, and his father. We were smiling, carefree, young. I whispered to the photo, "I miss that boy. I miss us." Then I turned off the light, letting the darkness settle, not just around me, but inside me. And just like that, they both walked out, leaving the pancakes untouched. I sat there, staring at the cold food. It wasn't about the pancakes. It was about everything they represented. Every memory, every piece of love I'd tried to hold on to. And now, it was all slipping away. That evening, when they came home, Emily barely said hello. She went straight upstairs. Ethan followed, but I stopped him. "Ethan," I said softly, "can we talk?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, I'm tired. Can it wait?" I nodded, but deep down, I knew time had already run out. Music softens, emotional, melancholic piano theme. In the silence of that guest room, I realized something painful. I wasn't really living there. I was just staying there, temporarily, inconveniently, a guest in my own son's life. And the longer I stayed, the more I could feel his kindness shrinking under the weight of embarrassment, discomfort, and guilt. He didn't want me there, not because he didn't love me, but because love wasn't enough anymore. I was a reminder of age, of obligation, of everything he wanted to escape, and that realization broke something deep inside me. That night, I folded my clothes neatly into a small bag. I sat on the bed, staring at the old photograph I'd managed to save from the fire. Me, Ethan, and his father. We were smiling, carefree, young. I whispered to the photo, "I miss that boy. I miss us." Then I turned off the light, letting the darkness settle, not just around me, but inside me. It's strange how life can break your heart quietly. Not with a scream, but with a whisper. I thought I'd already felt the deepest pain possible when I lost my home. But what came next? What happened in that house? Hurt in a way I'll never forget. It was a Sunday morning. The rain had finally stopped. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, soft and golden, the kind of morning that used to mean peace. I woke early, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. Emily came downstairs first, dressed beautifully for church. She barely looked at me before reaching for her purse. Then Ethan followed, buttoning his shirt. He smiled faintly. "We'll be back in a few hours, Mom. Do you need anything?" I smiled back. "No, sweetheart. I'll be fine." But as they were leaving, Emily said something that I'll never forget. She turned to him and whispered, not quietly enough, "Make sure she doesn't touch the thermostat again. I don't want another crazy electric bill." Her voice was sharp, annoyed, as if I was some irresponsible stranger. Ethan said nothing. He just nodded. And that silence, that quiet agreement, was the first stab of the knife. After they left, I just sat there, staring at the empty room. The ticking clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator. It all sounded louder than it should have. I walked upstairs, into my little guest room, and sat on the bed. I looked around at the bare walls, the small window, the single chair. I had spent my whole life building homes, making warmth, creating love. And now I was just occupying space, a guest, a burden, a forgotten mother. Later that day, Ethan's old friend, Mark, stopped by unexpectedly. I hadn't seen him in years. "Mrs. Parker," he said, smiling warmly. "Wow, it's been ages." I smiled back, genuinely happy to see a familiar face. We sat for a while, talked about old times, how Ethan used to stay up late playing video games, how I'd yell at them to go to bed. We laughed. For a few minutes, I felt normal again. But then, Emily came home. Her expression changed the second she saw us in the living room. "Oh," she said flatly. "I didn't know we were entertaining guests." Mark smiled politely. "I just dropped by to say hi to Ethan." We were catching up. Emily's eyes darted to me, and I could feel the judgment in her stare. Her tone turned icy. "Right. Well, Ethan's busy, and it's been a long day." Mark got the hint. He stood up awkwardly. "I should go." "Nice seeing you, Mrs. Parker." I watched him leave, embarrassed. Emily didn't say another word. She just started cleaning the coffee table, muttering under her breath about boundaries. That night, Ethan came into my room. "Mom," he said softly, "Emily told me you had a guest today." "Yes," I said gently. "Mark dropped by. It was nice to see him. I didn't think it was a problem." He sighed. "It's not, Mom. It's just, she doesn't like surprises." "You know how she is." I nodded slowly. "Of course," I said. "I'll be more careful next time." But inside, I was shaking. Careful. I had to be careful. In my own son's house. That word stayed with me all night. The next day, everything fell apart. Emily came home early from work. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes. She walked in, her voice sharp. "Can we talk?" I turned off the water, drying my hands nervously. "Of course." She crossed her arms. "Ethan and I had another argument last night about you." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Her tone softened slightly, but only for a moment. "I just think this living situation isn't working. You're a sweet woman, but you don't fit here anymore. We need our space, and you need to move forward with your own life." I tried to stay composed, even as tears filled my eyes. "I understand," I said quietly. "I'll start looking for a place tomorrow." But then, she said it, the one thing that would haunt me forever. She sighed and murmured, "You know, I didn't sign up to take care of someone else's mother." The words hit me like a slap. I couldn't breathe for a moment. "I never asked you to," I whispered. Her expression softened, maybe out of guilt, but she didn't apologize. She just walked away. That night, Ethan came upstairs again. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his face. "Mom, she's right. We need to make some changes. Maybe it's time we found you a senior community. You'd be around people your age, have your own space." His voice was gentle, but every word felt like a dagger. A senior community. That's what I had become now. A project to be relocated. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just smiled weakly. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "Whatever makes things easier for you." He looked at me, tears welling up in his eyes. "Don't say it like that." "I'm trying to help." I reached out, touched his hand. "I know you are, and I love you for it." But in that moment, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. He wasn't afraid for me. He was afraid of me staying. Piano music swells, emotional and heavy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the streetlights outside. It was then I realized. Love changes. Sometimes it fades quietly, like the last ember of a fire. And no matter how much you want to hold on to it, you can't. Because love isn't always enough to keep you in someone's life. The next morning, I packed again, this time for real. As I zipped the suitcase, Ethan knocked softly. "Leaving already?" he asked, his voice breaking. I smiled through tears. "Yes, I found a small room to rent. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine." He stepped forward and hugged me. It was warm, desperate, full of guilt. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I didn't mean for things to be like this." I hugged him back, holding on as long as I could. "I know," I said, "but sometimes life doesn't burn down houses to destroy us. It does it to show us who will help rebuild." He pulled back, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, please don't hate me." I smiled softly. "I could never hate you. I just miss who you used to be." Music slows, quiet, haunting violin joins. As I walked down the driveway with my suitcase, I looked back one last time. Ethan stood in the doorway. Emily's shadow lingered behind him. I waved. He didn't wave back, just stood there, frozen. And for the first time, I truly understood what heartbreak meant. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was walking away from the person you love most, knowing they won't stop you. Music fades into silence. It's been 3 weeks since I left Ethan's house. 3 weeks since I walked away with my little suitcase, my heart still trembling from the weight of goodbye. I rented a small room in an old boarding house on the edge of town. It's quiet here, just the hum of traffic outside, the sound of the wind through cracked windows, and the creak of old floors when I walk to make tea. It isn't much, but it's mine. The first few days were hard. I kept expecting the phone to ring. I thought maybe Ethan would call, ask if I'd settled in, or just say he missed me. But the phone stayed silent. I watched every sunset from my tiny window, wondering if he ever thought of me when the sky turned gold. Wondering if he missed the smell of my cooking or the way I used to hum old songs when I cleaned. It's strange. When your child stops needing you, you don't just lose a role. You lose a reason to wake up. One night, after another dinner alone, I took out a notebook and began to write. Not because I expected him to read it, but because I had too many words inside me and nowhere to put them. Soft music fades slightly, leaving only piano. Narration, as if reading from the letter. "My dearest Ethan, I don't know if I'll ever give you this letter. Maybe one day you'll find it tucked inside a box, or maybe it'll be lost like the ashes of our old home. But I need to write this, even if it's just for me. The night my house burned down, I didn't just lose my home. I lost the life I built for us. Every corner of that place held memories of you. The pencil marks on the kitchen wall where I measured your height. The chair where your father used to read. The garden you helped me plant when you were 7. Everything I ever loved vanished in the flames. But when I came to your door, Ethan, I wasn't asking for a house. I was asking for a home again, just for a little while. A place where I could feel safe, where I could still be your mother. I know it wasn't easy for you. You have your own life, your own responsibilities, and maybe I stayed too long. Maybe I became a reminder of everything you didn't want to deal with. But I want you to know, I never wanted to be a burden. I just wanted to be near you. When I saw you as a child, I used to think, as long as he's in the world, I'll never be alone. But life has a cruel way of changing what we expect love to look like. Sometimes love means holding on. Sometimes it means walking away before you're asked to leave. I didn't want you to see me broken, Ethan. That's why I smiled, even when I was falling apart. That's why I said, I understand, when you told me to find another place. Because I wanted your last memory of me to be peaceful, not bitter. I've spent my whole life trying to give you everything I could. But I realize now, maybe what you needed wasn't more from me. Maybe you just needed space to live your own life. Still, Ethan, I hope you never forget. Everything I had, I gave because I loved you. Every meal, every sacrifice, every prayer whispered when you were asleep. You were never an obligation. You were my joy. And even now, in this small room, with nothing but a suitcase and an old photo of us, I still feel lucky that I got to be your mother. If one day you ever think of me, not as the woman who stayed too long, but as the mother who loved you too much, then that will be enough. Love always, Mom. Pause. Only faint piano remains. When I finished writing, I just sat there, staring at the page. The ink had smudged in places where my tears had fallen. I pressed my fingers to the paper, as if holding his hand through it. Then I folded the letter neatly, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it inside my old purse. I didn't know if I'd ever send it, but somehow, writing it made the silence hurt a little less. The next day, I took a walk. It was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I passed a park where a young mother was playing with her little boy. He was laughing, chasing bubbles, his tiny hands reaching for the sky. I stopped and watched them, smiling through my tears. It was like looking back in time, at the version of me who once had everything she ever wanted. The boy ran into his mother's arms, and she scooped him up, kissing his hair. And I thought, that's love, pure and simple. No expectations, no conditions, just presence. When I got back to my room that night, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. An envelope slipped under my door. It was from Ethan. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a short note, written in his hurried handwriting. Mom, I'm sorry. I've been thinking about you every day. I didn't handle things right. You didn't deserve any of it. Emily and I, we're going through some things. But that's no excuse for how I treated you. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. Please call me. Love, Ethan. Soft swell in music, bittersweet piano and strings. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried harder than I had since the fire. Because even though his words couldn't undo what happened, they meant one thing. My son still cared. And that, to a mother, is enough to light a little fire inside the ashes. That night, I wrote a reply. Short, but honest. My dear Ethan, I'll always be here. That's what mothers do. But please don't apologize for growing up. Just promise me one thing, that you'll be kind. Kind to your wife, kind to yourself, kind to the people who show up for you when life feels heavy. And when you think of me, don't remember the woman who cried in your guest room. Remember the one who sang to you under the same roof that now lives only in our memories. That's the version of me I hope you carry with you. Love, Mom. When I sealed the envelope, I didn't send it right away. I placed it beside my bed, next to the photo of Ethan as a boy. Sometimes I think I'll mail it tomorrow. Other times I think it's enough that it exists, because maybe love doesn't always have to reach the other person. Sometimes it's enough that it was written at all. Time has a strange way of moving when you're waiting for someone to call. Some days, it crawls like a wounded animal. Other days, it rushes by in a blur of sameness. Mornings, evenings, meals for one. That's how the next few months felt. After Ethan's letter, I thought we'd talk soon. I imagined his voice on the phone, maybe shaky at first, but then warm, familiar. I imagined him saying, Mom, come home. But the call never came. I tried not to count the days, but I did. 34 since his letter. Then 61. Then 92. I didn't want to seem desperate, so I didn't reach out. I told myself, if he wants to talk, he will. But every time the phone rang downstairs, even if it was for someone else, my heart leapt, foolishly hoping it was him. In those quiet months, I learned something about loneliness. It isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just the sound of your own spoon clinking against a cup, or realizing you haven't spoken a word all day. I started to talk to the photograph on my nightstand, the one of Ethan at his high school graduation. He was smiling so brightly then, full of plans, of promise. And I'd whisper, "Where did you go, my boy? What happened to us?" One afternoon, I went to the library, not because I needed a book, but because it was warm and full of life. People reading, whispering, living. That's where I met Janet. She was a retired nurse, about my age, with kind eyes and a voice that carried gentle authority. She asked if the seat beside me was taken. It wasn't. Before I knew it, we were talking about the books we loved, about the way the world seemed to move too fast, about how sometimes children forget that parents are people too. When I told her my house had burned down, she gasped, but not with pity, with genuine concern. She said, "Losing a home is one thing, but losing connection, that's the real fire, isn't it?" I nodded, unable to speak. She understood without me having to explain. Over the next few weeks, Janet became my friend. We had coffee together at a little diner every Thursday morning. She'd tell stories about her late husband and her son, who lived across the country but called her every Sunday. And I'd listen, smiling, pretending it didn't sting to hear how easily love still lived in her life. But she gave me something I hadn't had in months. Someone who saw me. One Thursday, she asked gently, "Have you talked to your son lately?" I swallowed hard. Not really. We exchanged letters, but that was months ago. She looked at me with such softness. You know, pride can be a heavy coat. It keeps you warm at first, but after a while, it just weighs you down. That night, her words kept echoing in my head. Maybe I was waiting for Ethan to reach out when I should have been the one to call. So I did. Sound. The faint click of an old phone being picked up. I dialed his number slowly, my hands trembling. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, "Hello?" It was his voice, deeper, tired, but still him. "Ethan," I said softly. There was a pause, like he couldn't believe it was me. "Mom?" "Hi." Just that. Hi. So small, yet it made my eyes fill with tears. We talked, awkwardly, carefully. He asked how I was. I said fine. He asked if I'd found a new place. I said yes. I asked about him and Emily. He said quietly, "We're working on things." We were 2 people walking on thin ice, afraid that one wrong word might break it. After 10 minutes, he said, "I'll come visit soon, okay?" I smiled through the ache. I'd like that. But soon turned into weeks, then months again. He didn't come. And deep down, I knew life had pulled him further away than either of us could admit. One morning, I got a call, but not from Ethan. It was from a hospital in his city. The nurse's voice was calm but serious. She said, "Mrs. Turner, your daughter-in-law Emily listed you as an emergency contact. She wanted you to know Ethan was in an accident. He's stable, but he's asking for you." I froze. The world around me seemed to blur. The kettle whistling on the stove, the rain tapping against the glass, all of it fading to a dull hum. He's asking for me?" I repeated, hardly believing it. "Yes, ma'am," the nurse said. "He's conscious, and he wants his mother." Sound, tires on wet roads, car engine, rain softly hitting windshield. I don't remember much of the drive, just the blur of headlights, the sound of rain, and my heart pounding against my chest. When I reached the hospital and saw him lying there, pale, bandaged, but alive, everything I'd been holding in for months just broke. He looked up, his eyes weak but soft. "Mom," he whispered. I took his hand, my tears falling onto the white sheet. "I'm here," I said. "I'm right here, baby." He tried to smile. "Didn't think I'd see you so soon." "Don't say that," I said quickly, squeezing his hand. "You're okay. You're going to be okay." He closed his eyes, a small tear slipping out. "I'm sorry for everything," he murmured, "for how I treated you. I thought I had time to fix it." My voice broke. "We do, Ethan. We have time now. That's all that matters." He nodded weakly, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were us again. No resentment, no distance, just mother and son. That night, I sat beside his bed, watching him sleep. Machines hummed softly, the rhythm of his breathing syncing with mine, and I realized this was what love really was, not grand gestures or perfect words, but showing up when it matters, being there, even after the silence. When he woke up the next morning, the first thing he said was, "Mom, I want you to come home when I get out." "Please," I smiled through my tears. "Home?" I said softly. "Which one?" He squeezed my hand. "Wherever you are." Music swells, emotional piano, hopeful strings. In that moment, everything that had burned, the house, the bridges, the old wounds, felt like they could finally begin to rebuild. Love doesn't always survive in the form it started. Sometimes it burns down and grows again, smaller but stronger. And maybe that's what forgiveness really is. Not forgetting what happened, but choosing to believe something beautiful can still rise from the ashes. It's been 6 months since the accident. 6 months since I walked into that hospital room and saw my son, fragile, broken, but still mine. Now he's home again. Not the house that burned, not the one I lost, but a new place, one we found together. A small cottage on the outskirts of town, white walls, blue shutters, a porch that creaks when you step on it. Nothing fancy, but every inch of it feels like peace. Ethan healed slowly, broken bones, stitches, physical therapy. But the hardest healing wasn't in his body. It was in his heart. There were days he'd stare out the window for hours, his face unreadable. Sometimes he'd apologize out of nowhere. "Mom, I'm sorry about the house," or "I should have come for you sooner." And every time, I'd tell him the same thing. "It's done, sweetheart. What matters is we're here now," because I'd learned that forgiveness isn't a one-time act. It's a choice you keep making every day until the hurt stops whispering. Emily came by often, too. At first, it was awkward. A few polite words, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But then, one evening, she stayed after Ethan went to bed. We sat in the quiet living room, the air thick with things unsaid. Finally, she spoke. "I owe you an apology," she said softly. "When you came to us after the fire, I wasn't kind. I thought I was protecting our space. But really, I was protecting my own fears. I didn't say anything. I just listened." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I was scared. Scared that having you there would remind Ethan of the past. Scared that I'd never measure up to the mother who raised him so perfectly." Her words broke something open in me. Not anger, not resentment, but understanding. I reached for her hand. "Emily," I said, "I never wanted to compete with you. I just wanted to belong somewhere again." We both cried, two women bound by the same man, learning that love doesn't have to be divided. After that night, something shifted between us. We became not just family, but friends. She'd bring groceries, help me plant flowers by the porch. We'd laugh together, share recipes, even gossip about the neighbors. And sometimes, when Ethan watched us from the window, he'd smile, the kind of smile that said peace had finally found him too. One morning, I woke before sunrise and stepped outside with my coffee. The world was quiet, just the chirping of early birds and the smell of dew. As the sun began to rise, it painted the sky in pinks and golds. And for the first time since the fire, I didn't feel loss. I felt gratitude. Gratitude that life had taken everything I thought I needed, only to give me what I truly did. Because if that fire hadn't happened, I might never have seen how strong I could be. If Ethan hadn't turned me away, he might never have realized how much he still needed his mother. And if our hearts hadn't broken, they might never have learned how to mend. A few weeks later, Ethan came home from work carrying something under his arm, a long flat box wrapped in brown paper. He set it on the kitchen table. "Go on," he said. "Open it." Inside was a framed photo, an old one I thought had been lost in the fire. It was us. Ethan, maybe 10 years old, standing in front of our old house, holding a garden hose and laughing. I was behind him, smiling, caught mid-laugh too. Tears filled my eyes. "Where did you find this?" He grinned. "Remember the neighbor, Mr. Kelly? He had an old camera. Said he found this print when he was cleaning out his shed. I had it restored. I traced the image with my fingertips. The old house, the flowers, the sunlight. A moment frozen before everything changed." He leaned closer and said quietly, "I want to hang it here, Mom, so we never forget where we came from and how far we've come." Soft emotional swell. Strings join the piano. That photo hangs in our living room now. Every time I pass it, I feel both pain and peace. Pain for what was lost, peace for what was rebuilt. Because this new house may not have the same walls, but it holds something the old one didn't: understanding. A few days ago, Ethan said something that stayed with me. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sky turn orange. He said, "You know, Mom, I used to think love was about always getting it right. Saying the right thing, doing the right thing. But now I think love is just about showing up, even after you've failed." I smiled, my heart full. "That's all any of us can do," I said. "Just keep showing up." He nodded. "Thanks for not giving up on me." I looked at him, my grown son who'd once been my little boy chasing bubbles in the yard, and I said softly, "I never could." That night, as I sat alone in my room, I opened the drawer of my bedside table. Inside, still folded neatly, was the letter I wrote months ago, the one I never sent. I unfolded it and read the words again. Every tear, every heartbreak, every longing that had lived on that page, they no longer felt heavy. They felt like part of the story that got us here. I smiled, folded it one last time, and placed it gently in the fireplace. As the paper curled and turned to ash, I whispered, "Goodbye, old life. Thank you for everything you taught me." Soft sound, crackle of fire, gentle wind outside. The flames flickered softly, not like destruction this time, but like rebirth. And I realized I wasn't losing anything. I was finally free, free to live, free to love without fear, free to start over. Music swells to a warm, uplifting crescendo. Sometimes life has to burn everything down so you can see what truly matters through the smoke. Homes can be rebuilt, relationships can be healed, but the human heart can rise from anything. Music fades into silence. Narration, whisper, final line. My house burned down, but from the ashes, I found my home again. The end. Thank you so much for watching this story to the end. Sometimes life takes everything away from us: our home, our comfort, even the people we thought we could count on. But every ending brings a new beginning. And sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel for more real, emotional stories like this one. We post new stories every week. Stories about love, loss, forgiveness, and second chances. Stories that remind us all what it truly means to be human. Tell us in the comments what you felt while watching, and where in the world you're watching from. Your words mean more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in love and forgiveness.